Hello everybody, Ace here, giving it to you straight with day 85 of the Video Log Challenge, and today I wanted to talk to you all about triggers and how they're actually really good for us. Alright, so I've been dealing with PTSD, I believe, my whole life. I didn't realize what any of it was. It wasn't even until 2017 that I actually started pursuing knowledge and information on PTSD because I thought that was my purpose, was to help other veterans like myself figure out what's going on within ourselves, especially after we get out, and why we feel so incapable after being elite warfighters. I was an aviation mechanic, so I had over $20 million in training. I ran a $25 million aircraft shop at 23 years old. And then I get out, I get a college degree, and then I basically can't even pull myself out of bed. Only about 3 or 4 years later, none of it made sense. And so by August of 2017, in the beginning of my, I'd say during the first year of my dark winter of the soul, dark night of the soul, I asked God for help. I asked God for purpose. And what really got me to go towards that purpose was this. I was in a Facebook group called Band of Bravos, and it had about 90,000 members. It was all a bunch of veterans. There was a post about PTSD, and this guy kind of told his experience about PTSD and everything like that. And then I went into the comments, and it was just horrible how terrible other veterans were treating each other about their trauma, about their PTSD. Oh, you don't got PTSD. You didn't put rounds down range. You didn't get shot. You didn't get blown up. You're a pogue, person other than grunt, and people just putting each other down about trauma. My trauma's worse than your trauma. You're a pussy. You're this. And it's just, it really startled me, and it made me understand that our issue in the veteran community, especially with suicide, goes way deeper than anything that we were hitting on the surface. And that's when I decided to go forth and start a national dialogue on veteran PTSD, suicide, depression, anxiety, mental health issues, because there were so many veterans that were still killing themselves. And it continued even, till now. There's still veterans doing it. I've lost two Marines since that time. Since that time I started this journey, I lost 2 Marines due to suicide. And to me, that, how does one get to the point of putting a gun into their mouth, especially a veteran who has already raised their right hand and sworn an oath to defend the nation and to defend one another? And how does one get to that point? And so quickly, too, after being a staff sergeant or even a sergeant, because my 2 buddies that took their own lives, one was a staff sergeant and one was a sergeant. So you had 2 very capable Marines, not only capable humans, but capable Marines. To get to the rank of sergeant or staff sergeant is not easy, which means that they were dedicated and they were consistent and they were disciplined and they had everything they needed to be a great Marine. That's why they gained the ranks. And then they get out, and then within 2 or 3 years of them getting out, they take their own lives. And it made no sense to me. That had to be a triggering event. And then I started to recognize my triggering events. I started to become more aware through my evolution spiritually, through awakening my soul, through going through the dark night of the soul and all that stuff, that I started recognizing my triggers. I'd get in an argument with my family and I'd go on a 2-day bender, drink myself into oblivion. I'd be so hungover to the point of almost alcohol poisoning. And then it would take me 2 or 3 months to come back from that because of the guilt and shame. And it was this vicious cycle of being triggered and choosing coping mechanisms, being triggered, choosing coping mechanisms. And so I started to try to avoid those triggers. I tried to avoid situations that would put me in a place where I would go all the way down. And because no one really knew what a trigger was. I mean, even the word trigger has been stigmatized over the last 3 years, social justice and snowflakes and all this, where the people on the right were putting down the people on the left with this idea, oh, you're just triggered. Like, when somebody's getting literally triggered like that, literally, they make fun of that one girl because she was, they made all those memes and gifs, right? They're funny, but in reality, that woman was going through a trauma in real time, just like a combat veteran. When a firework goes off, or a tire pops, or a car backfires, all of a sudden they're on the ground low crawling. Just because you weren't in combat, just because you're not a veteran, doesn't mean you don't have PTSD. If you've been a human on this planet over the last 100 years, you have PTSD. Collectively and individually, it's impossible not to. The whole point of it has been trauma. So what are triggers? Sorry for the long wind up to that. I just want to kind of give you guys a basis of why I've gone so deep into triggers, so deep into PTSD, why I'm such an advocate for it. Because the PTSD is going to be the greatest thing that ever happened to me. The PTSD will end up being the thing that helped me unlock myself, rise out of the ashes like the phoenix, and become the man that I always knew I could be in this life. Because we cast everything as wrong, because every feeling's wrong, every emotion's wrong. That's not happiness, joy, or any of those things. All of a sudden, we're not normal. And so we're getting triggered and we're then beating ourselves up. And what's crazy about triggers is that the trigger itself isn't even the issue. It's how we deal with ourselves when we get triggered that creates the issue. So how are triggers good for us? Because it's demonstrating what we still have inside that we need to let go of. We still have residual trauma. We still have even collective psyche trauma that we're actually using these tuning forks to purge. And the only way that you can literally remove triggers, trauma, PTSD, emotional residual, all that stuff. The only way you can let it go is to feel it. It's got to be broken up out of your DNA, and then you have to feel it out of you. And what I've recognized over the last, let's just say the last month, since the conjunct, right, since December 21st, what I've noticed is that I'm feeling all these emotions and feelings from my past again. I feel like I'm taking a step back to go 2 steps forward, and I didn't know what it was, and I'm in my mania, and I'm all these things, and I'm like, but I've done all this work, it doesn't make any sense. It was because I had to still feel all that shit that's in me. I still got scar tissue with decades of trauma that has hardened into almost feels like bone. It almost has gotten to the point of hardened to bone. It's calcified that much. That's hardened emotion. That's hardened trauma. Energy that's stuck in my body, in my joints, on my bones. That's why I'm like 142 pounds right now. I still can't put on muscle. I barely can even do yoga because I'm still letting go. I'm still shedding the parts of me that were killing me in the past. I'm shedding all those storylines, all that narrative, all that human drama that I just turned in on myself, and then I got triggered and anxious to the point where it hardened itself onto me through my distraction and coping mechanisms. And that's where we're at now. That's what I'm having to deal with. But something I'm recognizing, it's not mine anymore. So I'm disassociating myself from the feelings and emotions, and I'm allowing myself to be. I'm listening to my body. I'm listening to my ego, because I now understand what my ego is actually trying to say when it starts to get triggered. That's the key. The ego is not going to go away, people. We don't kill the ego. And I'm sorry, I thought we could absorb the ego, but that's not a thing either. You got to balance the ego. You got to harmonize the ego. You got to translate the ego. And then you got to actually start treating it like a loving part of your family, like you are a brother, a big brother or sister to that little ego. And then allowing that ego to be itself, the shadow, the human, to be itself, to help guide you in this 3D dense physical reality that in reality we have no reference to as the consciousness. All we have reference to is this vehicle, this quantum computer, and this body telling us this is how we feel, this is what's going on, this is the information that I'm gathering. And that's why it takes time for us to process, is because we're not processing. Our ego is processing, and our consciousness is the one sitting on top going, yeah, no, that, and kind of guiding. But when we become our ego, when we become our trauma, when we become our feelings and emotions, we can't see the forest from the trees. And therefore we fall from grace out of our higher self, out of our oversoul perspective, and into the human muck, the drama, the narratives, and the storylines that are no longer serving us. And so those triggers, when they come and you're shaking and you're pissed and you're, I feel good. Good. Keep going. Feel it. Hate it. Even the thoughts in your head, growl, grunt, do all that stuff, but detach. Understand you're not manifesting with those thoughts. That was my fear. The biggest fear I believe we have about the thoughts and feelings we have is this idea that we need to have perfect thoughts and feelings to be perfect manifestors, which is true, but you don't start, you don't go on a bike track doing jumps off dirt before you rode a little trek bike with training wheels. And so it's a process. And so eventually we'll get to the point where we'll have complete control over our thoughts, our words, and our actions. But as of right now, during this crazy time on this planet, as so much energy is being blasted still, which is just clearing our DNA and unlocking it and raising it up. And as we clear, we have to feel it out so that we can keep expanding, right? Those aren't ours. Those aren't us. We're feeling it for us. We're feeling it for the collective, but that isn't us. And therefore, we're not manifesting with those thoughts. But if we get taken down and start assuming the role of the ego, start assuming the role of our trauma and of those feelings and emotions, and we start, oh, I hate this and that person, and we really start to try to figure it out by projecting, and then we'll start manifesting. But in reality, we're going to manifest what we need anyway. That's something I'm recognizing as well, is if there's someone in your life that just keeps triggering the fuck out of you, right? Like for whatever reason, you're trying to be kind and generous and loving and compassionate and float above like the amazing light workers that we are. But for whatever reason, this person just fucking keeps triggering us to the point where something happens, the relationship falls by the wayside, we say something stupid. It's probably because it needed to happen and we just weren't pulling the trigger ourselves. Again, because we're still scared to ruffle feathers. Again, because we're still scared to speak our truth, stand in our lying, and tell people that I don't like the way you're infringing on my sovereignty. We then wait until we explode on them and then give a reason for that relationship to blow up. And again, like I said, if you blow that relationship up because you failed to do the right work at the right time, the odds of that relationship coming back together again are few and far between, especially because of our pride. Very rare that we will reach out and apologize to one another. I was very good at it before the Marine Corps. In the Marine Corps, it ended up becoming a detriment to, you don't apologize for things, you just own it and you move on. Apology was a sign of weakness, ego. And so over the last 7 years, I've had to learn how to apologize again, especially because no one I know apologizes either. Unless I stand in my truth, I stand in my line, and I demand an apology. I don't need your excuses. I don't need your justifications. I don't need your passive-aggressive comments. What I need is an apology. What I need is acknowledgement that you, as the human, understand what you did. And as the being, you can own what you did so that you can move on yourself. Because, again, as the light workers and the light warriors, it is our job to be the beacons and to show the way for other humans, which also means calling them on their shit in a loving, compassionate, but stern way. Standing in that line, and even if we get triggered because of the exchange, we don't allow that to take us down. We don't allow that to go, ooh, I don't want to deal with it because it makes me uncomfortable. Good. You need to be uncomfortable. On the other side of discomfort is freedom. And that's all these triggers are these triggers are demonstrating to us the things that are holding us back that we need to let go of so that we can move forth as the warriors of light that we are and live in that 5D kingdom that we've been promised. But it takes work, and it takes work in every moment, and it takes a choice in every moment. And that choice is this: do I hold my triggers against me, or do I show myself compassion, love myself, hear myself, work through it with myself, and then let it go? Because every time you work through a trigger instead of distracting through it, every time you work through a trigger instead of coping through it, every time you work through a trigger instead of pushing it onto somebody else and transferring instead of transmuting, you help the collective, you help your family, you help your future kids, you help your future grandkids. Everything we do for ourselves, we do for everyone else. It's all one, it's all perfect. You are perfect in every now moment. There's nothing you can say, do, or believe that makes you imperfect. The only idea of imperfection is a separation from God, and that is this ownership of this body, which is us and not us at the same time. So go through your triggers, embrace your triggers, be grateful for your triggers, because it's all perspective in this life. You can be the narcissist, the ego narcissist. I'll make another video next about soul ego. But you can be that spiritual narcissist where you need to be perfect all the time, and then as soon as somebody comes and touches you, you're like, hey! And you run away and you freak out on them, and you start blaming other people, you start pointing. You're not evolving. It's an illusion. We're just mirrors to one another. And I'm grateful for every person. I hope there's people in here that I've had disagreements with or arguments with or falling outs with that watch these videos. Because I love you and I'm so grateful for you. I'm grateful for our falling out. I'm grateful for the triggers. I'm grateful for the opportunities to show my own ass so that I can see that how I don't want to be anymore. That's the other thing. That's compassion. That's really coming together. It doesn't mean yet those people have to be in your life anymore. That doesn't mean yet you even have to like those people. But you can appreciate them. You can be grateful for them. And if you can start casting your triggers in a whole nother light and see that it's happening for us and it's happening for our soul growth, it ain't that big of a deal. Let it go or let it be, right? But again, if you have PTSD, right? If you still have PTSD to the point where your triggers really fuck you up, to the point where your triggers literally are like life altering, like where you get taken down for a day, you can't go to work, then you need to get some help. Not some, a lot. I'm sorry, I did it. That's why I'm telling you. I did 18 months of intense behavioral cognitive therapy, accelerated resolution therapy, a PTSD program on top of taking an entire year off of my career to let myself heal. And then I also did psychedelic therapy on top of that to help me decalcify my pineal gland, reconnect the hemispheres in my brain, and allow all that calcium that was just stuck through all the VACCINEs they stuck in me in the Marine Corps up to 20, all of the high fructose corn syrup, all of the chemtrails, all of the fluoride, everything in your life. So if you feel like your PTSD triggers are so intense that it's debilitating, that means that you have an intense amount of trauma. It's stuck in your body and you have to go get some external help. You cannot do this on your own. And if you haven't surrendered to something bigger than you yet, you most likely can't do it that way either. You can't keep doing what you're doing and expecting different results. And that's again why these triggers are taking us down, is because we again are expecting us to not be triggered when we don't do anything to work through those triggers. It's the craziest thing in the world. It's completely asinine. It's like giving a 12-year-old who has never driven a car the keys and going to tell them to go get you some milk, and then them getting into an accident, and then you getting mad at them for getting into an accident when you didn't never taught them to drive. They're not old enough to drive, mature enough to drive. And so you set them up for failure. And that's what we do for ourselves. We're constantly setting ourselves up for failure because we don't see that our triggers are here for us to show us what we need to work on, to let go of, to root out, so that we can ascend into the fifth dimension, into the higher consciousness fractals of God that we are, and finally find that peace and tranquility that we so dearly crave. So I hope you gain a little bit more clarity in your path today. I hope you get a little bit further on your journey, and I hope you can bring in a little bit more love into your heart so that you can see that only your human is the one being triggered. You're not being triggered. It is your job to help your human through that trigger, to transmute it, not transfer it, which means not taking it and spitting it onto somebody else. You transmute it by working through it, by rooting out the trauma and figuring out what was the cause of it. And when you do that for yourself, you do that for everyone else, and we bring more love and light into the world, and everyone wins. And that is why the only thing you have control over is you, your thoughts, your words, your actions, and your path moving forward. So there's no more time to externally put our shit on everybody else. It's only time to internally deal with it so that we can let it go, so that we can give the rest of the collective a chance to heal their shit. Because look how hard it's been for us to heal our shit with all the mess of the rest of the collective. We don't know what's ours and what isn't. So imagine how powerful it would be if 250 million awakened souls on this planet all cleared their trauma. How much easier it would be for the other 7.75 billion people. Every person that clears their trauma makes it that much exponentially easier for other people to clear their trauma, especially because then you become a wayshower and you can demonstrate where the pitfalls are so that everybody doesn't have to hit their face on every wall like you did, so that we can finally be in a place where we're helping all of one another and we're truly moving into that 6D. All this 5D is about that self-introspection. All this 5D is about that personal ascension. 6D is about ascension en masse as Christ consciousness. So if you liked what you've seen and heard today, hit that like button. If you want to join the Army of Energy, hit that subscribe button. Again, social media is crap, so I'm not even using it. So hit me up on Gmail. I got the link below. Dirt brand partner, amazing stuff, helping me help you clear those trauma, help you clear those triggers. Hit me up if you want to learn more. With that, I hope you have a wonderful day, an even better evening, and I will see you all at the same time tomorrow. Take care and goodbye.